We often walk through life believing we are surrounded by companions, people who cheer for us, support us, and walk beside us through both light and shadow. But the psyche knows otherwise. There are those who wear the mask of friendship, but secretly serve the unconscious forces that seek to diminish rather than elevate. These friends do not confront you with swords, they disarm you with smiles. You begin to notice that your joy unsettles them, your progress invites their silence, your vulnerability becomes their currency. They do not stab the body, but the spirit subtly, consistently, and often with your permission. The danger is not that these people exist. The real danger lies in your blindness to them. You are not crazy for feeling exhausted around certain people. You are not ungrateful for outgrowing those who once felt familiar. Your inner instincts whisper truths long before your mind accepts them. Pay attention. Many such individuals are driven not by malice, but by their own unhealed wounds. Their envy is not about you, but about the part of themselves they have long abandoned and now see reflected in you. When they laugh at your dreams, they reveal the graveyard of their own. When they mock your change, it is because they remain stuck. But even this understanding must not lead you to tolerate harm. Compassion without boundaries invites spiritual erosion. You may find yourself surrounded by 26 friends, but only 1 or 2 souls who genuinely wish to see you thrive. The others, they compete, compare, criticize, all under the disguise of concern or humor. They question your authenticity not because you are false, but because your truth disturbs the persona they have worked so hard to maintain. This is not a call to paranoia. It is a call to awakening. To ask yourself not, who do I like, but rather, who truly nourishes my growth, and not who listens, but who understands. Observe who grows quiet when you succeed, who interrupts when you speak of your pain, who supports you when there is no benefit to them. In these small details, the real landscape of your social life is revealed. To walk away from such relationships is not cruelty, it is clarity. The psyche does not evolve through constant exposure to poison disguised as wine. To choose your circle wisely is to honor your path, your light, your becoming. And if you fear being alone in this process, remember, loneliness in truth is far superior to connection in illusion. Your healing will offend those committed to remaining unhealed. Let it, your light will disturb those hiding in shadows. Shine anyway. You are not crazy, you are awakening. We do not attract people randomly. The friends in our life are often mirrors not of who we pretend to be, but of what lies dormant or unexamined within us. When someone in your circle constantly belittles your achievements or undermines your emotions, they are not simply being unkind. They are exposing a part of your psyche that may be too passive, too forgiving, or still in denial about what it tolerates. This is the first discomforting truth. The people who harm us often get their invitation from a door we left open ourselves. We unconsciously seek familiarity, not safety. If betrayal, judgment, or emotional neglect were familiar patterns in childhood, we may unknowingly bond with similar energies in adulthood. The so-called friend who drains you, who gossips behind your back, who competes with you, is not always an intruder. Sometimes they are the outer projection of our own inner wounds, unhealed and unacknowledged. This is the hidden shadow we are drawn to people who reflect unresolved parts of ourselves, no matter how harmful they may be. This shadow isn't evil. It is simply unconscious. You notice its presence when you begin to feel split in the company of certain friends, one part of you playing the expected role, laughing at the right times, staying agreeable. But another part, quiet and watchful, begins to sense the dissonance. That's when the body tightens after each interaction. That's when your dreams begin to speak, using metaphors of betrayal, masks, or hidden threats. The subconscious doesn't lie. It signals the presence of emotional parasites long before the mind is ready to confront them. What makes these friendships even more complex is that they often come dressed in shared history, loyalty, and laughter. They remember your birthdays. They help you in times of need. They might have even cried with you. But beneath the surface, there is a lack of reciprocity. Their support comes with invisible contracts. Their empathy has expiration dates, and slowly, their presence becomes less of a comfort and more of a weight. Still, you hesitate to label it after all. How can someone who has shared so many good moments also be the one secretly sabotaging your spirit? This is the double bind. You know something is off, but their actions don't always look like malice. It's not always loud betrayal. It's often subtle, an eye roll when you speak of a new idea, a laugh that lingers a little too long when you fail, a pattern of forgetting the things that matter to you. At first, you make excuses. Then, you begin to internalize the discomfort, assuming the problem is your own hypersensitivity. But it isn't. It's awareness, and it's painful because it asks you to re-examine who you've allowed into your sacred emotional space. This emotional reckoning sets the stage for deeper reflection. If certain people in your life mirror unhealed parts of you, then removing them is only one part of the equation. The other part is addressing why they felt familiar in the first place. And that leads us directly to the nature of false bonds and emotional parasites. Once the awareness emerges that some friendships mirror our unhealed wounds, the next step is to examine how these relationships manage to root themselves so deeply in our lives without being questioned. The answer lies in the architecture of false bonds. These are connections built not on truth, but on emotional dependence, guilt, or convenience. They feel secure, but only because they remain unchallenged. Their strength is not in depth, but in repetition. False bonds often begin with intense loyalty, not because of genuine resonance, but because of shared wounds. Trauma has a way of recognizing itself in others. We find comfort in those who understand our pain, even if that understanding becomes the very reason we stay stuck. Many of these friendships are bonded, forged in suffering, sustained by obligation, and protected by denial. You convince yourself that because someone has seen you at your worst, they deserve to stay even when they no longer support your becoming. But emotional parasites do not announce themselves. They disguise their needs as love. They blur the line between advice and control. They require you to shrink whenever you shine. Their dependence masquerades as connection, but in truth, they feed on your energy, your validation, your listening, your presence. And when you begin to withdraw, when your healing threatens their grip, they accuse you of selfishness. This is their survival tactic, to guilt you into staying energetically available, even when you're emotionally depleted. What makes these relationships so insidious is their invisibility to the outside world. They are rarely abusive in obvious terms. There are no cruel words or violent outbursts to point to. Instead, there are long conversations that leave you feeling unheard. Moments where you celebrate only to be met with indifference or subtle redirection. They forget your milestones but expect you to remember theirs. Their suffering always takes priority, and you begin to notice that your growth somehow makes them uncomfortable. And yet you stay, not because you're weak, but because you're conditioned to mistake emotional labor for loyalty, conditioned to believe that setting boundaries means betrayal, conditioned to think that your healing must be postponed until everyone else catches up. The parasite thrives in this conditioning not because it is evil, but because it has never learned to regulate without external emotional supply. And unless you become conscious of this dynamic, you'll keep mistaking your own exhaustion for personal failure. You will begin to feel the shift first in your nervous system, a tightness in your chest before seeing them, a sense of relief when they cancel plans, a growing silence after every interaction. These are not coincidences. These are warning signs from the body. Your intuition is no longer willing to collaborate with the lie, and when you start to honor this knowing, the mask begins to fall. You see clearly, this bond was never about mutual respect, it was about silent servitude. When the illusion of friendship shatters, what remains is often not hostility, but a smile. A carefully preserved, socially acceptable smile that hides what words dare not speak: envy. The most dangerous form of betrayal is not the one that wounds openly, but the one that festers in admiration's disguise. It claps when you rise but prays for your fall. It compliments your achievements while quietly resenting the part of you that refuses to stay small. You begin to notice it in subtle timing when your good news is followed by their sudden crisis, when their validation feels hollow, a little too delayed, or entirely absent. You sense their inner recoil when you speak with joy. They don't argue with your growth, but they stop participating in it. The conversations that once felt effortless begin to feel strained. They no longer ask how you are. They just wait for their turn to speak. Their support has turned into surveillance. Envy, when unexamined, becomes corrosive. And when it exists within a friendship, it feeds on every part of you that evolves your creativity, your resilience, your ambition. What was once laughter now feels transactional. What was once connection now feels conditional. You catch yourself minimizing your success to preserve their comfort. You water down your happiness so their insecurities remain undisturbed. And the worst part, you feel guilty for outgrowing them, but that guilt is not yours to carry. It was manufactured by a dynamic that punishes expansion and rewards compliance. You were never meant to shrink to make others feel safe. Yet envy, especially from those we call friends, manipulates us into believing that our success must be negotiated, that shining too brightly makes us arrogant, that dreaming too boldly makes us selfish. This is not friendship, it is emotional censorship, and still they smile, they share your posts, they show up to your events, they tell others how proud they are of you, but the energy tells a different story. Behind the smile is a subtle competition, one they never verbalize, but always act upon. They mirror your steps, but never credit your influence. They follow your growth, but secretly hope you'll stumble. And when you do, their concern is sincere because it relieves them. True friends are not threatened by your becoming. They are inspired by it, but the ones consumed by envy live in quiet torment. Your evolution is a reminder of their stagnation. Your healing makes their wounds ache louder, and the more you rise, the more they feel left behind, not because you abandoned them, but because they never chose to walk their own path. They watched, they waited, and now they resent. And yet they remain close, because envy thrives in proximity. It needs access to your life to feel superior when you fall and inferior when you soar. This is why the next phase becomes crucial, not just recognizing who envies you, but understanding how they mask it through projection. This leads us into the psychology of camouflage, where emotional enemies wear the face of friends and manipulate you not with force, but with guilt disguised as love. When envy cannot be admitted, it transforms into projection. And projection, the unconscious act of assigning one's inner conflicts to another, is the most common weapon in emotionally camouflaged relationships. It allows the envious friend to preserve their self-image while subtly casting doubt on yours. They won't say they're threatened by your growth. Instead, they'll question your authenticity. They won't admit to jealousy, they'll call you too ambitious, too sensitive, too much. These words are not random. They are calculated releases of inner tension. Your confidence becomes their label for arrogance. Your emotional intelligence becomes overthinking. Your boundaries become coldness. In truth, these comments have little to do with you, they are defenses. Defenses against their own refusal to evolve, but because you value the relationship, you begin to internalize their discomfort as your defect, and this is where the manipulation takes root when you start questioning your clarity instead of their projection. Psychological camouflage is not about overt control. It operates in the gray. These friends offer advice that sounds helpful, but undermines your direction. They express concern about your decisions, but only after you've succeeded. They remind you of your past not to celebrate how far you've come, but to tether you to who you used to be. Their version of support is conditional. They will stand beside you as long as you remain manageable. This manipulation is difficult to detect because it wears the language of care. They will say things like, "I just don't want you to get hurt," when what they really fear is you outgrowing them. They will say, "I miss the old you," when the old you was more insecure, more dependent, easier to control. Their advice always carries an undertone of superiority, a need to remain one psychological step ahead, even if it costs your self-trust. And because they never raise their voice, never directly sabotage, never openly attack, you hesitate to call it what it is. Instead, you second, guess yourself, you dull your instincts, you bend your truth to keep the peace. And every time you do, the camouflage grows stronger because they know now that all it takes is a little emotional guilt to bring you back into submission. But this guilt is artificial. It's manufactured through familiarity, a loyalty trap. You've known them for years, you've survived hard times together, you've shared secrets, and so you ask yourself, would someone who knows me so well really harm me? But the real question is, can someone who refuses to grow with me ever truly support my transformation? Because without mutual growth, all relationships default to power. This power doesn't always look like dominance. Sometimes it looks like dependence. They need you to remain confused so they can feel wise. They need you to stay broken so they can play healer. They need you unsure so they can be the voice of reason. This dynamic isn't love, it's ego preservation. And it cannot survive what comes next, the act of conscious self-observation, where you begin to track your emotional reality, not just theirs. That path leads us into the final truth that liberation from toxic friendship does not begin with blame, but with awareness. It is in self-observation that the silent pattern ends and the inner authority returns. The moment projection becomes visible, the illusion starts to unravel. But dismantling the illusion is not enough. The deeper transformation begins when you turn the gaze inward. Self-observation is not self-blame, it is radical responsibility. It is the process of asking, without shame, what parts of me allowed this dynamic to exist for so long? This question does not come from guilt, it comes from power. Because true freedom is never handed to you, it is claimed through awareness. You begin by observing your emotional reactions without judgment, the tightening in your stomach when certain friends speak, the hesitation in your voice when expressing joy, the quiet resentment that builds when your needs are dismissed. These are not signs of weakness, they are signals. Every suppressed emotion, every ignored instinct, every moment of forced politeness is data. You are not overreacting. You are responding to a pattern that your conscious mind may not yet have words for, but your nervous system remembers well. The key is not to react, but to witness. You don't need to expose them or confront them to reclaim your peace. The first act of liberation is internal. It is the silent refusal to abandon your truth. It is the inner shift from seeking validation to observing intention. When you step into this mindset, you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and begin asking, Why did I keep myself in spaces where I was required to earn love? This shift is not easy. It reveals the uncomfortable truth that some friendships survived not because they were healthy, but because you silenced parts of yourself to keep them alive. Your silence, your overaccommodation, your chronic explaining, these were not just habits. They were survival strategies, but survival is not the same as growth. And if a friendship demands you remain a smaller version of yourself in order to stay accepted, then it is no longer a space of belonging, it is a cage, carefully decorated as comfort. Self-observation turns on the inner light. You begin to notice the pattern: how certain people only reach out when they need something, how they never truly listen, only wait for their turn to speak, how you always leave the conversation a little emptier than when you arrived. This isn't pettiness, this is pattern recognition, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The veil drops, the energy shifts, and the power begins to return to where it always belonged within you. And in this clarity, the decision to distance is no longer dramatic. It is simply aligned. You don't owe anyone an argument, a justification, or an exit speech. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the space to evolve without the emotional static of those who refuse to meet you in your wholeness. Let them call it selfish. Let them call it dramatic. They called it love when you were breaking yourself to stay. And so the path forward becomes quiet, focused, clear. No bitterness, no revenge, just distance and truth. Because the real work is not just removing toxic friends, it's understanding the version of you that tolerated them, and choosing never to become that small again.